Hi, welcome back to Missouri Cricket Barn Homestead. This is Debbie, and my, how the garden grows. We've already went through a whole blooming of our Kennebec potatoes and our other potatoes, which are purple potatoes, and I'm not sure of the variety because I've had the seed potatoes for a while. They are just beginning to get to the point of blooming. So you can see, even though they were planted at the same time, the differences in a little late blooming versus a little earlier blooming. So Kennebecs and purple potatoes. And we had the new plot that we had placed over here. It's been doing kind of rough because it was a newly broken plot of ground. We don't have any fencing on this, so the chickens have definitely done a number on everything. So we're going to have to get in here and fence this. But our potatoes are coming up. You can see them all about throughout there, and all of our peas surprisingly came up. It's hard to see them because we've got some weed pressure in here. We're gonna have to get in and do a little bit of some weeding and turning the soil over a bit. But all three rows of our peas did come up. This is an Amish variety of peas, and they're coming on pretty strong. So hopefully we'll have some peas. I'll be putting some trellises in here pretty soon. And our potatoes, even though they're kind of spotty, they're just now starting to come up because it's been a little bit dry. We haven't had any rain for about 4 or 5 days, and we don't have any rain in the near future, so we may have to resort to some watering here very soon. The ground is still kind of damp if you dig down a little bit, so we're not going to water anytime soon, just keeping an eye on it. But we do have a few squash that did come up, but I'm going to have to plant a few more in here just to fill in because chickens, again, did a number on it. But for some reason, they didn't manage to get the peas, even though I thought they were eating the peas. We still have plenty of peas that did come up. We'll get those trellis and they'll get off and starting pretty soon. But anyway, otherwise, the main part of the garden that is fenced, even though we're still having some rabbit pressure, and then we started having some cabbage worms from the cabbage moths. So I did have to resort to putting a little bit of some dust on my cabbage plants this evening because you can see they are just chewed up through there. So we are having some pressure from cabbage worms that I had not had back in Cheyenne. We had cabbage worms and we had cabbage moths, but they tended to more pollinate rather than have a whole lot of worm pressure. Any worms that I saw I would pick off, but we've had so many on these cabbage plants because, again, we are a bit more south. We have a longer growing season. We have different climate entirely, and it's more favorable to cabbage moths and things like that. So we've got a lot more pressure on that. So we've had to do a little bit of dusting on our brassicas. Carrots are doing really well. We've got in and thinned them. So they are now starting to form some really nice big carrots in there. And then we filled in for some spots that did not come up, and those have came up. They're just really small out at the end of the row, so it's kind of hard to see them. But they are starting to come up. We'll get those thinned here very shortly. Onions, not doing the best because, again, we had a whole lot of rain in a very short period of time. We had 6 inches of rain in just a couple of days, and it really put a number on these onions. And this is the wettest part of the garden. So this is why I chose to put my brassicas here, because they do better in a more moist soil, damp soil. And onions don't. Onions prefer a little bit more dry. And now that it's dry, it really doesn't help a whole lot. We've actually got some heads on some onions happening because we are getting a bit more dry. But we have a lot less onions. I planted somewhere near 300, and I think we only have about 100 maybe left. So we've had a lot of pressure. I had to actually transplant my shallots out of one of my beds that I have our radishes in now because they were just not doing well in the area. So I put them over here with the onions. They are doing a lot better because I like it a little bit more moist than these onions do. So they have really taken off, whereas the onions have kind of sat there. So our rutabaga is still doing amazing. We actually had to fill in a little bit because we had a couple of them die. It started getting so dry. So we had to fill in a little bit, and hopefully those will be up shortly. but those will come on so quick we won't even notice a difference with that. And I had plenty of seed that I had saved. And our lettuces and things like that are now coming up, so you can see those out there toward the end of the row. But I do have to replace our Swiss chard. It's just been too hot. Swiss chard just kind of died back, so I need to go back in there and plant that again, as well as some spinach. But our radishes are doing amazing. Those are right there, and hopefully they won't bolt, but it has been so hot, there's a possibility. Sweet potatoes, because of the heat, are doing amazing. They like it in these kinds of conditions. So they have just started spreading like crazy. I've actually had to train the vines back a little bit because they keep trying to invade into our celery. The celery has really started to take off like crazy as well. You can see all the bunches in there. I think we've lost down to about 20 bunches now. We had 23 to begin with, so I think we're down to about 20. And same thing with our cauliflower, just a lot of pest pressure and the rest of our cabbages. So I did have to get in here and dust those just because of all of that cabbage worm pressure. I also had to dust our kale and our rutabagas because, again, just so much pest pressure. Our butternut squash out there at the end of the row, which you can just barely see, we have got butternut squash like crazy on those. They are really starting to take off. So doing great there. And just doing really amazing on all of the rest of the garden. The corn is just growing by leaps and bounds. It is tasseling now. This is our early Sunglow hybrid, as well as our peaches and cream. Peaches and cream has not started to tassel yet because it's a little bit later than our early Sunglow hybrid. The early Sunglow hybrid is a short variety of corn, about 4.5 to 5 feet tall. Starts tasseling at about 3.5 feet, and then it reaches that 4.5 to 5 feet mark. And in about 6 weeks after the tasseling is when you get some really nice ears on the corn. And the peaches and cream is just a little bit later, but about the same as far as how it works. We're getting a lot of blooming in the beans like crazy in there, so we should have beans very, very soon. And all 4 of these rows have beans, as well as a couple of the rows of popcorn. And this Amish popcorn, by the way, is 6 feet tall and climbing. This is the largest popcorn variety I have ever seen. Most of the popcorn I've ever experienced has been a short variety, so this is just huge in my opinion. So, and we've got a couple of rows of beans in there on the popcorn, and it's doing fantastic as well. And all of our squash is still doing amazing. We've had a couple of leaves die back, but I've been checking for squash bugs. I'm not seeing any squash bugs in here. And I think the difference may be that we have them nestled between the 2 varieties of corn, and that may have helped out quite a bit. So we've got a lot of squash setting in there that are about 4 to 5 inches long right now. I like mine a little bit larger than most people do. So we've got so many zucchini and yellow straight neck squash that are coming on, and the dark green zucchini. And then we've got pumpkins and Boston marrow pumpkins, as well as the red curry setting on the vines right now as well, just everywhere. And they're just spreading like crazy. Same thing with the butternut back there. Just vines going nuts. We went ahead and planted a few more varieties of squash and pumpkins between each one of the corn rows. You can see those are up right now. Should start, actually some of them have already started to make runners, so they should take off pretty quick. And we've got some cucumbers at the beginning of some of the rows as well, and those are doing fantastic. But we look for this popcorn to start tasseling soon, I hope, because it's about 6 feet tall and it looks beautiful and healthy, nice big stalks. So hoping for that. And then our tomatoes are absolutely loaded. Every vine has worlds of tomatoes on them. We've had a little bit of some dying back at the bottom of the tomatoes that I've got in here and trimmed up a little bit, and that was from all of that rain that we had in that short amount of time just about a week ago. So a lot of that was caused by that. But a lot of those tomato plants don't have that either. Some of them just weathered through it just fine. But you can see our tomato plants are nearly the height of the 6-foot Amish corn, which is pretty amazing. In fact, their stakes are just now completely covered. I can't see the stakes anymore. I'm actually having to trellis them on themselves. They're staked, but tying them up is just tying them up on themselves. So you can see hopefully some tomatoes hanging in there. Just gobs and gobs of tomatoes everywhere, and every time I come outside, those tomatoes are larger and larger, or there are more tomatoes depending on if they're a cherry variety that are in there. It's just crazy amount of tomatoes. And again, we have over 100 tomato plants. So, and we're still planting. We've got new raised garden beds that my grandson has gotten, and we've planted more tomatoes in those, and peppers and things like that. Our peppers are making a comeback. We had some issues at the beginning with it just being too wet, and we had a lot of dieback on some of their front pepper plants, but all of the ones in the back are doing fantastic. But now we're having a whole lot of bounce back, and we have a lot of peppers hanging on all of these pepper plants. So I'm looking for a lot of new peppers in here. Our okra, the same thing. Lots and lots of okra, lots of cucumbers that are setting right now. But you can see our little squash that we have planted between each of the rows. Those are up and going, and we've had to fill in a couple of spots because we get chickens flying over the fence, get in here and basically get in here and just start taking off. Lots of okra going on, and our watermelon vines, look at that. They are just going nuts. Lots of new vines on there, running everywhere. Cantaloupes, the same thing. Everything is just going nuts. All of our cucumber vines. We've got so many cucumbers, and they are now beginning to climb our trellis. It's just amazing the amount of growth on everything that has occurred just in the last few days. Check out these cucumbers. And again, our cucumbers are actually in the shade. This is a tree that they are shaded by. You can see there how close that is. And they're doing amazing. So much for full sun, right? Because these guys don't get full sun at any point of the day. They're in the shade, and they have cucumbers all over them. This is Palace King cucumbers. They're an Asian variety, and they have cucumbers on them already about 4 inches long. Just amazing amount of growth. You can see they're climbing the trellis, and you can see all of our other watermelons and things. Again, these are in the shade, and they've not been planted very long. They are taking off like crazy. And you see our other watermelons over here. Those are actually older, so they've had longer to grow. So it's not having a lot to do with the shading. It's the heat. They love heat, and all of this heat lately, they've just taken off like crazy. But look at those tomatoes, just amazing. So anyway, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell for notices on new videos that will be coming out, and let me know in the comments below how your gardens are doing wherever you are. And again, we are in Milan, Missouri, which is Garden Zone 6B. So not a whole lot of difference from Cheyenne, Wyoming, other than we have a much longer season. So we look forward to seeing you in the next video.